We're missing counselors and
In progress.
I see everyone else has joined us.
So the recording's in progress.
Good morning, everyone. This is the May 22nd meeting of the Finance Committee, and I see we have multiple people joining us. This is the last day of our department reviews as we prepare the Finance Committee report for the council. So I thank you all for getting up and being willing to join us this morning. My first order of business, other than calling us to order, since I see we have a quorum, is to make sure members of the committee can hear and we can hear them. So I will just call out names. Bob Hegner.
Present.
Kathy is here. Mandy Joe.
Present.
Bernie.
Present.
And Tom Porter.
Present.
There, Great. We are missing two others, and when they join, I will recognize them. Okay. One of them just texted me that they're having a computer issue, so that they will join us. So as I said, thank you all very much for, we have, as you know, we have a lot of departments today to cover. And Bob Hegner and Tom Porter prepared the questions. And so just before we called the meeting to order, Melissa explained to us that written answers to many, if not all of these questions have been posted, but you should assume we haven't read them yet. Yeah. So what we've asked people to do is lead off with any kind of overarching statement they might want to, and then with others, we kind of work through the questions, knowing that you've prepared some written answers. It's terrific. So Dave, I don't know if any of you would like to start off with overarching. Yeah, Tom, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do we have public comment to get through, or is there none?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, we start with public comment. Thank you. And I see Ray Harp is in the audience, Melissa. So we should bring him in. So
He's here.
Yeah, he's been allowed to talk. I think I tried
Okay.
to bring him in as a panelist. That didn't work, so I did it this way.
Okay, I also see that Alicia has joined us. Alicia, can you hear us and we hear you?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, we are open for public comments. We do start our meeting with public comments. If anyone in the public would like to make a comment, now raise your hand and we will allow you to talk. Seeing no public comments, I see that, whoops, Andy has joined us. Andy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. That was the only reason I raised my hand. I can hear you.
And I see Bernie's hand is up.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest we have a ton of staff here, but I was going to suggest that we exercise veterans preference and let Steve Connor go first since he's remote, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, Bernie, I'm not sure which questions we had for Connor, but Steve, we would absolutely welcome you starting out.
Yes. I did see the questions. I did not realize you wanted them handwritten. I thought they were just to be for this particular meeting.
And I just should say, we only sometimes get them handwritten. We've been going through them verbally, so that was perfectly fine.
Okay. So the two questions I was presented with, one was as far as the CREST team is concerned, what kind of involvement have I had with them, and has there been any benefit? And that's definitely an easy question to answer. Yes, there is a benefit, and yes, they've been very helpful for some of the situations that we've come up with. I don't always know, and veterans in the community don't always know that I'm there and that there is such a thing as veteran services. So when they've been called to handle some disputes that happen in apartment complexes, things like that, if they find out that person is a veteran, they know to call me, and they have called me to work together to kind of resolve the situation. So, and when we've had, unfortunately, an eviction, I worked with them a lot to meet the several needs that the veteran had as we were then rehousing him. And so they were able to transport him and be present more than I could with our limited amount of staff and amount of communities that we handle. So they came in very handy for that situation and with other situations. So that's an easy yes. I've gotten a lot from collaborating with Crest. The other question is about the idea of having Amherst become a Purple Heart community. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how we go about it. I had made some quick inquiries. I'm looking to have a committee come together, and I'm trying to make sure I have the right people according to how the town likes the rules are. Every community does it differently. I've done it in, I think, 8 of our communities I've assisted with. Hatfield just recently did it, but they didn't involve us in the beginning. Now they're trying to involve us after they've approved it. Because one of the things as you do that, the select board, the town council, however the approving committee would be, they voted in, but then you want it to be recognized. And the best way to get it recognized is by putting up signs at various locations on the outskirts of town as people are entering town to let them know that you've declared yourself a Purple Heart community. Should I allow, Paul has his hand up.
Yeah, I just see Paul has his hand up. So Paul,
Yeah, and just to add to that, Steve's really busy this week because of Memorial Day in 13 communities or some enormous number of communities he's working in. But I've been in touch with the Purple Heart community directly. Our goal is to get something passed for, I think August 5th is the National Purple Heart Day, and we want to be part of the Purple Heart Trail across the country. So it really is basically a proclamation and the having a little bit of money to put up signs. And if that's what something the council would like to do, I'll be presenting that to you in the near future.
thank you.
Yeah, and as that I had done an estimate of just kind of how many signs we might need and what the cost would be. So there is an increase in my budget to cover that if things were approved. So and I saw Paul had sent me an email from the person he was talking to. We've gotten signs from different locations, but I wanted to have the committee look at the one that was provided to Paul because it is less expensive than many of the ones we found. So, but we've had good reliance. So there is an increase in my budget for that, and hopefully we will get that done in plenty of time before the Purple Heart Day.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other questions of Steve? And, you know, if there aren't, you're perfectly willing to, you're invited to stay if you like, but you can leave and get on with your day. Bob?
Yeah, Steve, I just wanted to ask if there's anything else the town council can do to help you and help our veterans in town.
One of the things, and I had talked about it last when we got around to Veterans Day, it's really hard to do all the commemoratives for all the communities that we have now, and so we get run a little ragged at this time of year because it's also budget season, and I have new towns, and everyone has their own budget. So I asked back on Veterans Day to the audience that was in attendance if they would be interested on serving on a town committee which would be responsible for commemoration. So for the 20 plus years I've been doing this, all the towns had veterans doing all the planning to honor other veterans, and those numbers have dropped. We've now lost the VFW in Amherst, so we don't see many of those veterans anymore. Amherst numbers are way down at the American Legion. If we want to keep recognizing these people, they're not going to be the ones that are going to be the active ones trying to do this. So I'm looking for community members to do it in all of our towns. In Northampton, we do have, but they sometimes rely a lot on our office, and I'm trying to get them as well to take more responsibility. It's just too hard to do it for all these towns. So I was gonna put in make a comment about it at the Memorial Day ceremony, that we would love to get more involvement of people. It's basically, we do almost the same thing every year. It's just plugging in variations of it. So it's not that difficult. It's just very time consuming with everything else going on.
Mhm.
Andy?
Yeah, just sort of follow up on that and see if we can move it along though. I think that there was an additional challenge you spoke with about previously, Steve, and that is the fact that the World War II generation is passing on, and even the Korean group, and that we're now getting into veterans from much more recent conflicts who are the ones who technically qualify, but they're a different group and they've been harder to reach.
Yeah, that's true. But as well, back, you know, during World War II, pretty much half of the male population that was eligible to served. Now we're at less than 1%. So the amount of people coming out who are veterans, you know, they're hard to reach because there's not as many of them. And I can probably count the ones on a couple of hands in Amherst that have returned that I've gotten connection with. And it's not a whole lot over the last, you know, those that have been discharged over the last 15, 20 years. So it is a struggle to get enough involvement. But I still think, you know, Memorial Day has gone on for a very long time. We want to keep it going and recognizing those that gave the ultimate, and to recognize them on Veterans Day. The other part that I just want to throw in is I've talked with some of the veterans in the community as far as the park or the area in front of Town Hall that's been redone. We have our Veterans Day ceremony. It was requested to see maybe we could do our Memorial Day ceremony there. It was, the veteran community wasn't very happy about it because they have the monument and the recognition is at the War Memorial Pool. What I would love to do is see if we can have a dialogue with everybody to see about moving that monument in front of Town Hall into the new area by the flagpole, because it's a significant flagpole and would be a nice location, but I just probably have to have the discussion with the remaining veterans that are involved in town.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. So Steve, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And as I said, you are more than willing to leave.
Thank you so much.
So Dave, do you have a, Zomac, do you have a sense of what order you would like to go through? Should we go through in the order of the questions that were sent?
Sure, Kathy. I think that makes sense, if that's okay with the committee.
Yeah, and Melissa, maybe just so everyone is on the same page, maybe you could show the questions and we can work through them then. And as I said, Dave, if there were some opening comments that people want to make, it doesn't have to just be the questions that our team thought of as we reviewed the budget.
Sure, that's fine. Well, maybe since in the order they are, conservation goes first. But also, why don't I just make a few opening statements? I'll be very brief because I know you have a full agenda. But thank you very much for having us this morning. I'm joined by our Sustainability Director, Stephanie Ciccarello, our Building Commissioner and Temporary Planning Director, Rob Mora, is also here. And I'll turn the mic over to them in just a few minutes. It's a pleasure and privilege to work with both of them and doing all the great work that we do in conservation and development. I think, as the committee knows, we work on a broad range of projects throughout town, across town, with the private development community, homeowners, residents, the university and the colleges. and also touch and work directly on a number of town projects. I was thinking this morning about the heat pump program, private development in downtown, University Drive, Amity Street, zoning changes, the recent zoning change that we worked on with the planning board and the CRC and up to and approved by the council on U Drive and the overlay district there. And kind of the first look we gave to the council at potential zoning changes for the future. Rental registration and trying to keep our community safe and healthy. The Fort River School for town projects right now on our radar screen, the big ones, Fort River School project, Jones Library, Hickory Ridge, Track and Field, the Bangs Center, and the list goes on. So there's never a dull moment in conservation and development. And I know Rob and Stephanie and Jeremiah, who all already spoke to you about facilities, would say this as well. But you see us a lot as department heads, but you don't see the people that work with us and for us and collaborate with us across town. So they do the lion's share of the work, and it's people in those projects that are getting things done, and people like Aaron Jock and Bob Parent and Dave Oskevich and many others in the various departments within C and D, and the list could go on and on. But they do wonderful work. They're dedicated. They're committed, and they make us look very good when we come to see you. So that's kind of my quick intro. And why don't I launch right into questions? So Hickory Ridge, lots of interest, lots of questions. It's an intense project. It's taken us a number of years since acquisition, and I think when we first acquired the property, I'm quite sure I never said it would be overnight that we would achieve all the goals down there. And here we are a couple of years later, and we're getting there. As you drive by, small changes, but important changes. The clubhouse is now down. The frontage is looking much better aesthetically, and it also sets the stage for reimagining what the frontage could be along West Pomeroy Lane. The big lift there, I will be perfectly honest, has been working with Pure Sky and the private company that is developing 26 acres of solar there, and that has been a really demanding and intensive process. Again, that has brought in many staff from conservation and development, but also from the fire department and DPW, and we expected that, and that's what we should be doing. We should be on town land or on private land. These solar projects with BESS systems are complex, and particularly the BESS side of it is relatively new to the town and to the region. So we're giving it all of our due diligence, and I'm told, and was in recent meetings last week, assured by Pure Sky that they would likely be done within about 60 days. The project itself, 60 to 75 days, and then they will wait for EverSource to make the interconnection so the project can be up and running this fall. So that's been a central focus. We've also been doing ecological restoration there, extensive ecological restoration with partners like the Mass Fish and Wildlife, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I've been talking to the town manager, to Paul, for some months, and have assured him and will work with him and through him to make a presentation to you as soon as the intensity of the budget season draws to a close, and that will speak to kind of the comprehensive planning pieces to the overall project, including reimagining what could happen on the frontage. And yes, in some of the questions there was the reference to we had thought that Hickory Ridge would be a likely spot for a South Amherst fire station, and upon deeper review and work with our new fire chief, that was determined that the site was large enough, but probably too far south. So that's my kind of long answer. Happy to give a more extensive presentation to the full council when working through Paul and through the president.
Yeah, Dave, I just in we need to just make sure the public is involved in the discussion on what to do with the frontage piece, because there's a lot of interest among the public with that. So in your presentation, just please include what you're going to do for public involvement.
Absolutely. And frankly, we haven't done a lot of visioning on the frontage because frankly, we've been consumed with the other elements of the project,
Understood.
including bringing down the clubhouse and managing the solar project to make sure that goes smoothly and according to the permits granted by the town and by the state, frankly. So yes, absolutely, Bob. There will be plenty of time to include the public in that discussion.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next question, and I would defer to Melissa on this if I got this incorrectly, but my understanding that so most of the focus there in question 2 was about personnel services. We did move the sustainability director out of conservation, and that became a standalone department. And I believe that's part of the change that you see there. And then, yes, we did have some personnel services changes, including a title change and an increase in salary for moving Aaron Jock from the wetlands administrator position to the conservation agent position, which reflects a much broader job description for Aaron based on the needs of the town. And I'm happy to defer to Melissa if I am incorrect there or missed something in the budget presentation.
I think that explains it. Thank you.
Let's see, the salary, Dave Zomek's salary. My understanding is my salary has and remains in conservation. It is not allocated across different functional areas. Again, I would defer to Melissa or Paul if they wanted to correct me on that. If not, I will turn it over to, do you want to do planning next or sustainability?
Either one. I mean, I think Bob and Tom, I think, organized these in the organization of the budget book, but whatever makes sense to you.
Doesn't
Fine.
matter how.
I'm
however
looking
you
at a
guys wanna
different
do it.
list. Yeah, I was looking at a different list on my desktop, but happy to jump right into planning. And I think Rob and I can uh, trade off on these. Hazard mitigation plan has been kicked off. The update to the hazard mitigation plan has been kicked off. I believe our last plan was 2017. We're required to have an updated hazard mitigation plan by the state and federal government. The fire department, working through the chief and his staff, have organized the first meeting and will be in May, and we'll be meeting again in June. Conservation and development will be actively involved in that, from Stephanie to Rob, myself, Aaron Jock, and others, collaborating with and supporting the fire department and getting that done. The question was about flooding, and absolutely, given the weather patterns that we're seeing, including today, and the last couple of weeks. But more importantly, these flashy storms that we're seeing in particular, if you recall, we got very lucky in Massachusetts, most of Massachusetts last year. Vermont saw some really extensive damage due to flashy storms, 4 or 5 inches of rain in an afternoon. And so that's really what we're going to be looking at. One of the factors we're going to be looking at in the updated hazard mitigation plan. It was interesting in 2017. One of the big focus points was winter storms, and it was interesting. Why winter storms? Well, that was right after the Halloween storm. Um, so we were all thinking that was 2011, and that was a very very significant event back then for Amherst and the region. So it was interesting going back in time a little bit in that document. So no question that rain events, intensive rain events, the remnants of hurricanes and such will be featured in the new plan.
Bernie, I see that you have a, yep.
Yeah, just real quick. I very much appreciate all the work that Dave and Aaron has been doing as part of the Fort River Watershed Association. Great cooperation. And in terms of the hazard mitigation plan, Dave, you rattled off a list of departments. I didn't think I heard the DPW.
Oh,
But I'm
yes,
sure-
it wasn't inclusive. That is a very large list, but DPW is at the table. UMass, Amherst College, Hampshire College. The state, of course, will be involved in helping us with that, and we're working with a consultant at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. PVPC helps many communities do those plans and updates, and of course, we're building on the plan we already have. A lot of the baseline is very solid. It's just looking ahead and seeing, particularly with regard to climate change, what are the new challenges? What are the new challenges and opportunities we face and could take advantage of as we look forward. But certainly, the rain events, flooding, flash flooding, are not new to Amherst, given the Fort River, Mill River, and their tributaries, but certainly looking at bridges, access ways, dams, all of the above. And the work we're doing is very timely up at Buffer's Pond. The dam and the dike study we're doing this summer and fall, very timely, because we haven't taken a hard look, a deep look at those structures in a long time. It's the perfect time to do it because we're seeing all these changes in weather patterns.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Dave. As you may know, I have some experience in hurricane recovery, and the recent storms have been pretty much rainfall events. I mean, the last couple of years have been wind events too, but there's been a lot of just rainfall events where you can see some of the flooding that occurred on the East Coast, and it's a real issue. And we're I don't know that most people are aware of the hazards, but I think it would be very important to really lay them out in the hazard mitigation plan and make sure people are aware of the hazards associated with the flooding risk. So,
And that plan does have a public component. So this was a group, the first kickoff meeting must have had 35 professionals in the room, but there is a public component to that. And once we have some of the draft sections of that plan done, we will be bringing it to the public through the fire chief as emergency management director in town.
okay.
And I'll turn it over to Rob for the next questions for planning.
Sure. So this next question was asking about the details of our East Amherst Village Center rezoning idea. I'll just say that for staff initiatives recently, collectively we determined that following the U Drive overlay as our first effort, East Street or East Village Center and College Street and Belchertown Road would be our second location to look at and study more extensively. And then the third being the downtown BL, which we are not prepared to move ahead with until the downtown design standards project is complete. So we had asked for capital money to engage a consultant to help with studying the Village Center, East Amherst Village Center. And this right now in concept, is intended to look at most of College Street. And there's quite a mix of zoning districts in that area. There's residential district, there's educational district. It turns into a little bit of RG zoning district before entering into the commercial zone, which runs right through the Village Center. And then there's, isolated spots of Village Center zoning in that area as well. And then we move back out to residential mostly until we hit Gatehouse Road. But, at this point, we want to look at all of that, not only identify and look at the challenges with the commercial district zoning and why, we constantly meet with developers with ideas that are, unable to move forward because of zoning restrictions in those areas. We also want to look at isolated parcels and, look at, what would make sense, potential overlay, 40R, all the options for those properties that are kind of special and unique and might be able to be repurposed or used for some sort of housing opportunity, but cannot because they are, for example, in the PRP zoning district or in a residential district, such as the Maplewood property or the Amherst Winery or property on Larkspur Drive. So, we want to look at all of that in the scope of this study. We haven't written this yet. We will. That'll be the first thing we work on later this year once we have confirmation of the capital funding being available, and we'll engage a consultant to get started on that work.
Rob, can I just follow up on that? In the budget book, you mentioned East Village, but you also mentioned North Amherst and a few others. Are you doing East Village first? Is there sort of a sequence of where you'd focus the consultant on, or are you working on them all at once?
So this particular project with the consultant would just be East Amherst area that I just described. The planning board, some of you may know, is also looking at studying North Amherst as a separate planning board driven initiative, and they have just begun the very early stages of asking for some staff support to start to put together some materials and look at that area. So that's being done concurrently, likely at a very different pace than this would be, because we'll bring in a consultant, after the July 1st confirmation of funding.
Okay, thank you.
Should I continue?
Continue.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. And Stephanie, I did note that we skipped over you. We'll be coming back to you. So we didn't forget sustainability. Yeah.
So number two, I wasn't exactly sure what the question was here, if there was one, but if it's just about timelines, I think I just covered the East Village, what we're expecting there. There really isn't a timeline on the completion of that project. It's not a rushed completion, so we will likely, put, extended 9-12 month duration on a contract for a consultant to work through that project at a reasonable pace. The downtown design standards, the project, as you know, is well underway. It's potentially, substantially complete by the end of the year, but most likely going to move into next year as well. So we've got a little bit of time left in that project before completion. I think Dave covered the discussion about the hazard mitigation.
Let me just inject, Rob. I neglected to mention, of course, others around the table were health, DEI, senior services, really thinking about underserved populations during some sort of a storm event. Have we considered all factors, transportation, access, evacuation, et cetera, of those low-lying areas in Amherst with regard to a flood, for instance? So thanks.
Okay, so we're moving along to the other set of questions here about the level of service provided, I presume from planning staff to applicants of various projects, and how that compares to other communities. So in my experience, I think it's certainly equal to or above for a service that's provided to those potential permit applicants. Dave and I in particular spent a lot of time with developers, looking at properties, looking at creative or unique opportunities in zoning, and trying to work with them to consider a project, I think, where we often run into challenges and slow down is when we are trying to explain a special permit process to a developer. And I think we've been fortunate to have local developers willing to risk that a little bit and take the chance with moving forward on projects that have turned out to be great projects, such as U Drive South is one that is not a straightforward zoning application process. And then, I think what's unique, or maybe, great for the process that other communities may not be able to offer is that a staff planner, professional planner is committed to a project throughout its process. So, those board and hearing meetings are staffed by planners, and the applicant is guided through that process. Our overall intention is to help the applicant have a complete application, not necessarily always what that application entails, but that it's complete so that the board or committee is prepared to react to it. And that's the focus of our effort. Most day-to-day interactions with applicants. There's a question from Mandy there.
Yeah, Mandy, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. We've seen a lot of, thank you for the detailed explanation of that question. It was a question that came from me. And when we have budget crunches like we're in now and will be in for the foreseeable future, is this a part of our services that we could reduce with minimal effect on our population? Is one way to ask it. And the other one is, how is it, and another question I have about this, how is our sort of above level of services to planning applicants affecting our ability to actually do the planning part of zoning and planning, as opposed to the reactionary getting projects through the East Street village center that you just talked about and all of those? How is service above average service levels on the application side affecting our ability to actually plan in town?
Sure. And we talk about this a lot. So, it's significant. It's really significant, and even not taking into account position vacancies, we're minus a director now, but even when fully staffed, and in my time here, and Dave might have similar or be able to add to this in his experience, but the bulk of the work is the day-to-day permit application process preparation and working with those applicants to prepare for these board meetings. And I think there's another question about the boards and committees that are supported, but it leaves very little time to commit to large projects and keep that going at a pace that can see it through to completion. And I think, with the exception of, 2020, 2021, where we had the opportunity because there weren't any permit applications to actually do some zoning. You saw 6, 7, 8 zoning amendments prepared and worked on in great detail by the staff. And that's just unusual. So it is significant. I've said this for years that, we need to look at our zoning bylaw and consider fewer special permits if we ever want to change that. It's the complication of that permit process, the length of that permit process, the unpredictable outcome of that permit process that consumes a lot of our time. The examples that we've in recent years have shown with administrative approval have been very successful, and I think begins to speak to looking at restructuring the bylaw in certain areas to allow process to happen in that way, to move things on and get certain projects into development without the 3 to 4 month zoning board process if it goes well.
Kathy, could I just add to
Sure,
what Rob said?
absolutely. Yeah, people should just
so-
jump in. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you so much for the question. And, it's not lost on Rob and myself and formerly, Chris Brestrup when she was here as planning director that, the broadening of the tax base is an essential function of the work we do. And as we look at challenging budgets over the next 3 to 5 years at least, how do we continue to have the growth that we want in areas that we wanted in the village centers and according to the master plan to support the services that residents would like in this town. And so Rob and I spend hours talking about that. In fact, I was noting during earlier part of this meeting just about some of the creative, and Rob mentioned them, creative discussions we've been having with developers, in particular about looking at some of our zoning, the PRP, and what the historic goals of the PRP are. They still relevant in 2025? Light industrial land, are we really going to get light industrial development off of Meadow Street and zoning little pockets like that? Rob talked about the complexity of our zoning, and I know you, Mandy, and other counselors have really focused on this over the years, and I think Rob spoke well about that we really need to look at the complexity of the zoning. In terms of workload, again, I think we need the staff we have. In fact, I think we're probably going to need them even more as we look at kind of creative options for the future. I also wanted to add one thing, which are grants. This functional area does most of the grant writing, at least the large grants, for the town of Amherst. Over the past 20 years, I think the figure I came up with recently was about $20 million that has come in through C&D, again, collaborating with other departments. But the planners do, if not all of the, or most of the writing of those large grants, they certainly do the collaborating and the facilitating of pulling those together. So things like Mass Works and MOD grants and park grants and the list go, Land and Water Conservation Fund grants, and the list goes on. So we've got our work cut out for us. I do think Rob was spot on, and we need to spend more time on broader planning initiatives and figure out a way to spend less time on processing permits. And part of that is zoning reform across the board. Thanks.
Bernie.
Yeah, I would agree that the zoning bylaw is overly complex and overly complicated. And would just offer the thought that a special permit is usually a kiss of death for developers or people who want to innovate. And I would strongly support Rob and Dave in terms of what they've said about looking hard at the zoning bylaws and trying to institute more administrative approvals and as a, not only as a time saver, but as a way to move development in town forward. So, thank you.
I also forgot to mention, the new position, which I believe has been posted, which is the planning / economic development director position. Really, that's Paul's initiative with strong support from us. That really having a planning director / development director who can look at the big picture beyond what is coming before us in the permitting pathways and really look at the zoning bylaw, work with developers, work with the university, work with the colleges on creative opportunities for the future in town. And that is going to be front and center for that new staff person.
I want to suggest, I mean, we could easily go into depth on this issue across the board, so maybe we can move on, but I do want to make one comment myself. Several years ago, we talked about, or actually I talked with Chris about potentially inserting impact fees on we don't have them in our zoning law, not to make them more complex, but one of the things I'm seeing happening with roads right near major construction projects is the roads deteriorate really quickly. And trying to anticipate that, even up here with the terrific housing complex that's coming in. If anyone hasn't tried to drive on Pulpit Hill, but suddenly there are crater-like holes in the road. There weren't before, but it's bigger, heavier equipment in addition to buses. So downtown, Rob, where the big buildings have just gone up, those roads weren't in bad shape. Now they're in bad shape again. We had fixed them. So just trying to think of what goes with intensity of development that should be absorbed in the development itself. That's a comment rather than a thou shalt, because a few other towns have done that. The fire chief talked about more calls to the big buildings because there are sprinkler systems in them. and false alarms can be triggered by the wired spring, so that a huge amount, it was a false alarm kind of call, but it's a staffing thing. So just thinking of the interaction with, we want the growth. So I will stop there because it's just a comment. It's not expecting an answer.
Yeah, thank you. Should I move on to inspections? I know we kind of covered a couple of the other questions, and you can go back to the list of boards and committees that the planning department supports in
Yep.
the list, but we can move on to inspections. This first, it's inconsistency, I guess, or conflict in the budget book. To clarify that, there are 4 lead inspectors. We have a lead building inspector, a lead electrical, health, and code enforcement are the 4 lead positions in the department. Moving on to the Board of License Commissioners, work related to the rental regulations. So we are just starting, to really get into, understanding and figuring out how to implement the inspection program and the rules and regulations that have been drafted by the CRC and adopted by the council. As we, started looking at those with the Board of License Commissioners, letting them know that they, should be prepared for a potential appeal. That has, brought up the discussion of really building out the appeal process procedures and how the hearing would be held, and everything from application through decision of an appeal. The bylaw doesn't get into great detail. It establishes who it goes to and some minor steps in the process, but the Board of License Commissioners would like to be ready for that in case it does happen. So that is what that comment was referring to. If there's no questions about that, the inspection program, we are working on that, getting ready to launch this year. I've started having conversations with the landlord officers of the Landlord Association, getting feedback, sharing the inspection checklist criteria that would be expected for all the owners and landlords to comply with. So we've been in that phase for the last couple of months while staff here in-house are building out the electronic system for tracking and conducting inspections. It's all going very well. We totally reconditioned the renewal application process this year. That launched a couple of weeks ago, and we already have 50% response, which is amazing. We've never ever been in that position so quickly, but a lot has to do with I guess my directive to staff was to, make it as easy as renewing my license and registration, and you pay a fee and you get your registration instantly, and they did it. So it's working really well. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on that this year. So as we I wanted to see how that would occur, and it looks like it's going really well. So as we get closer to the June 15th deadline for renewal, the plan is to launch into inspections, for early fall. So, after, June, July, August would be our time to start scheduling inspections, giving advance notice, and building out the calendar. So I think this moves into another question as well, but we have 2 new staff positions to support this program. So far, 2 of the 3. One code enforcement officer who has been with us for about 6 or 7 months now, has gone through the training certification process, been successful very quickly, is fully certified and ready to work. And he'll be prepared to start building out his schedule with those inspections this fall. We've also hired the administrative program assistant, the in-office staff to monitor the program, conduct scheduling, collect fees, all of the stuff that would be related to a very active program. When you think multiple inspections a day, throughout the week, reporting, filing, and just everything that would be involved with that, scheduling, and dealing with cancellations and so on. So we have those two positions. We haven't had a whole lot of luck filling the second code enforcement officer position. It's a job posting that's been advertised for a long time. We can continue to have it advertised, but what I've decided to do is just basically cut it in half. We're going to inspect at a rate that is comfortable for one inspector to get started this year, hoping that we'll continue to look for another individual to fill the position, and if we're lucky enough to have that by the beginning of the year, we can fill the schedule with additional properties to inspect, but we do want to get started.
Bob.
Yeah, Rob, I asked most of these questions. There is a disconnect in the budget books. I mean, you've explained what's happened, but this year it shows an increase from 10 to 13, when in fact it's really an increase from 12 to 13. And that's what threw me off a little bit. So, I mean, you've explained it, that's fine. But my understanding was that the inspection fees were supposed to cover the costs of the additional inspectors. And obviously there's a startup cost, associated with, we have to hire them and train them and all that. But when are we going to, you said that we'll see inspections start in the fall. When are we going to see revenues kind of pacing with the additional cost of the inspectors? In other words, when are we going to break even on the cost of the inspectors?
Yeah, the landlords probably wouldn't want to hear this, but the way we designed the fee schedule and the way the program's kicking off, we're in a better financial position because we collect the majority of the fees for the entire program through the permit application fee.
Okay.
And a smaller amount through the inspection process. So there's only about $75,000 of the projected revenue collected through the entire inspection program for the year. And by not having that position filled, we're actually, doing better at the moment financially. So I think if we go back to when we did lay out all of the finances for the program, the fees were not necessarily expected to cover all of the program. Paul had committed a portion of the strategic partnership money to be used to supplement whatever additional money was needed to cover the cost of the program. And we also were originally projecting significant legal fees that would be needed, for court actions and things like that. And that is not part of our budget. That is part of more of the general budget that Paul manages day to day. So, those numbers shift a little bit, but just to give rough numbers, the permit fees themselves produce over $300,000 of revenue, which would cover the staff that we have on site now in the office.
Okay. Thanks. It would probably be helpful to in next year's budget to tie these together so that we can see where the costs are and where the revenues are.
I see Melissa's hand is up, and I think one of the issues, Bob, is we don't assign the fees to the department.
Yeah.
Anyway, Melissa.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say is that, and Rob is aware of this and probably doesn't live it. The way that the general law works for inspection fees is that all inspection fees, including these new fees that you have created for the rental registration, while the revenue we can see coming in, that revenue is part of our general fund miscellaneous receipts, and is included in the huge number that the inspection department is a huge contributor to that local receipt, which is, generally around north of $1 million a year. That money does not go back to directly pay Rob or his staff's salary. It's just sort of out there. And so when the money comes in, it is split among the larger pot of all general fund municipal government, including, my office, planning, police, fire, and even schools and the library. So it is part of that bigger number of overall receipts. So where we can track how much is coming in for permits, it is not separated and shown, this is how much this program. I mean, we could probably give you a number on how much he's collected in the rental registration program. He could probably, but it's not reported that way, nor is it assigned specifically to that department the way an enterprise would be. So that is part of the reason that when we did the budget this year, that program, that department was not part of the cuts, because we knew that we were growing this department to fund additional revenue that supports the larger picture of the department. And that's why that department was very specifically not looked at, even though there were vacancies there, for cuts, because that filling those positions was essential to creating this revenue that was needed to support all of us.
Understood. It would be nice if we could see kind of, even if it's just in a narrative or in a footnote or something, that we're increasing the number of inspections and we're getting fees to cover the cost of that. And yes, wherever they go, they may not go directly to the inspection services, but it is, I mean, we're spending money to have inspectors in order to do the inspections, yes, but we're getting the fees to offset the costs one way or the other. I mean, just so we can see it. I mean, it's not that we don't understand that issue, but it would be nice to see just somehow an accounting of the costs and the revenues associated with the inspections.
Bob, we can make that a note in our report, for the future.
Okay.
Because we know it's embedded, is what I would suggest. So we skipped over Stephanie in sustainability. Then we have multiple other departments with us as well. So maybe I'm not sure. Yes, I was thinking of going back to sustainability. Did we finish the Rob planning? Yes. Okay.
I can be very succinct. So I'll try to be quick. I am mindful of 3 other departments waiting and your time left. So the first question was about basically just the funding that's been allocated to sustainability already, and what the town is doing with that. So when Jeremiah LaPlante had met with you all, I know he probably referenced the building assessments that were being done. And those were holistic assessments, not just looking at the energy use of the buildings, but obviously the physical structure as well, and the things that are needed. So in working to decarbonize our buildings, one of the things we need to make sure is that weatherization has been installed, and that it's a tight building envelope. Because if you're going to increase efficiency, you want to do that as the first step, and then decarbonize the building by transitioning to heat pumps and getting off fossil fuels. So a primary focus for the funding is for addressing buildings, which is a stationary source of carbon emissions, And carbon emission contributions in the town are primarily through stationary building sources and transportation. So buildings are one sort of pathway that we're looking to address. The other one is through the transportation, so our vehicles and vehicle use and the types of vehicles we're using. So we do now, as a climate leader community, have a zero emissions first vehicle policy. So moving forward, when we need to get a new vehicle, we first have to look at whether or not there's an electric vehicle that can fulfill the need of the required use. And if not, then we look to a hybrid. And then if not, we look to the most fuel efficient vehicle and so forth. So there's kind of a process. So funds are being allocated for building projects and transportation projects in the form of supporting electric vehicle purchase and also installing electric vehicle charging. There was some funds used to install EV charging at the police department this past fiscal year. So more of that will be coming as we move forward. So that's the primary use of those funds. Are there any questions from that response?
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand that. I just think it's important to put that in that information in the budget book somehow, because it's sort of lost, and I think you're doing really important work, and it's in, you're kind of working with other departments of the town. I just think it needs to, for someone reading the budget book, I think, you need to just give them more information than what I can see in the budget book. That's all. That's the main issue there.
Stephanie, I would just, try not to have you have to do things twice. For JCPC, you gave a very nice accounting of what this current year's funding had gone toward, in yours. And other than the report to us, you wouldn't necessarily see that. So it's a sort of thinking forward. And then you gave us what you're planning on using it, including for others who weren't on JCPC, that her bucket of money or pot of money can help with the design of a boiler system for bangs, the design, not the purchase of it. So I just think those kinds of, we had one public comment that said there wasn't an accounting for it, and there is an accounting, it's just that people don't see it. So trying to, when you do it, make it more visible. I mean, we can, again, this can be a budget book recommendation as we go forward.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, we're looking to transition off fossil fuels. So this is for our
Yep.
heat pump system. So that's, yes, funding can be used for the purchase of those items. But, this is a small, I mean, this budget, the sustainability budget, can support weatherization projects. It can contribute really towards getting the engineering for those heat pump conversions, but this funding is not going to get us, heat pumps unless they're small, one room units or something. We're talking about whole building conversions. So it's a lot more expensive. So and that will address something, another question later on. So are there any more questions about this first item?
Nope.
And I'll move on to the next. So the heat pump program, very exciting that it's finally launched. We're working with CET. They used to be the Center for Ecotechnology. Now they're just known as CET. We hired them through an RFP process. They've been an incredible program administrator, really responsive. Right now, we are using ARPA funding, and we have 15 households that are in the pipeline. So this isn't just 15 households interested. These are 15 households that are committed to moving through the process to transition off fossil fuels completely. Our goal for the program is 30. With the funding that we have and with the involvement of CET and all that they're doing to support this process. So 30 households is the goal. We'll do as many as we can and more if we could, depending on how the funding plays out. But so that's really exciting because we're just over a month going into 2 months into the program. There's one household that's already completed the whole process. and they've had their heat pumps installed. I know the town manager, I think, may have run into the folks from this particular household and said that had really favorable things to say about the program. So the program ends, all the funds have to be expended, obviously, because it's ARPA funding. The funds have to be expended and the program ends in December 2026. So the program administrator is very well aware of this. We had additional folks interested from attending the Sustainability Festival. There's more outreach planned. I'm confident that we will reach our 30 household threshold for sure, and our target. Any questions around that?
No.
Okay. Moving on to becoming a climate leader community. That was very exciting, I have to say. So thank you. Yes, so there are two pathways that you can obtain funding through the Climate Leader Communities program. One is for technical assistance, and that is $150,000 maximum funding opportunity. Again, for technical assistance, so for things like hiring someone to design the engineering for installing heat pumps, and also, designing the sort of the design, but also the install for the heat pumps, so we can get funding to do that. And then the other funding is for the accelerator, the decarbonization accelerator grant is really to do more implementation of like putting the heat pumps in. And those opportunities will afford us a chance to apply for up to $1 million currently. So they're on different tracks. So the technical assistance is on a rolling basis and it's kind of a first come, first serve. So the question was, what are we going to be applying for? So the first funding we're going to apply for is for the technical assistance so that we can have that engineering plan developed. We're looking right now at the Bangs Community Center because there's been a lot of work that's being done on that one right now. So that makes sense that that may be the first building that we decarbonize. Again, I'm working with facilities and it's sometimes a changing landscape because there's so much going on with buildings at every turn. There's, a new priority or, something arises that has to be addressed immediately. So right now the plan is technical assistance funding for engineering for installing heat pumps at the Banks Community Center. And then the next step would be to apply for the accelerator grant to actually do the install. But we could also use that funding for weatherization as well. So as long as it's contributing to the decarbonization effort of the building, that's what that funding can be for. And right now, it's just amazing that $1 million doesn't even get you that far anymore. Kind of a little overwhelming. So any questions about that?
The only one I have, it's when I asked Paul, and I think Rob was there for that. I know when you've done the building assessments, there was a list of buildings, and one that was not on the list was Crocker Farm, the school. But we've got it on a future potential capital list for the HVAC system for different pieces. So I would just urge Crocker to be on the list somewhere and I have no idea what the current conditions are, but at least getting an assessment and so that we can talk about investing in our schools for kids as well as central buildings. So it's just having Crocker be on the list
Yep.
comment.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and my understanding is that we're sort of, they all are, at least in where I'm coming from and in the work that I'm doing, like all the buildings are, the goal is to get all of those buildings decarbonized. So, definitely will be on them. Let's see, sorry, I forgot which question I was on. Leader. So I think the last question was Valley Green Energy and where we are with that. So after I sent my original responses to you all, and I only had a very small data point that I provided initially, I reached out to our consultant and who was wonderful. I can't say enough about Mass Power Choice. We've been very fortunate in our program partners, I have to say. They provided me with, a lot more information. So I did forward that to you as well. So you should have received all the additional data points, which had more to offer in terms of the number of participants. And I will say that it was encouraging to look at, the December 24 numbers that I initially gave you for the standard green, 100% green and basic, and then the April 2025 numbers. So this is the April 2025 numbers, but I will say the numbers went up in terms of enrollment, so that's great. But more exciting that you didn't have, and I didn't actually have initially and only first saw this, was the CO2 avoided in pounds. So that figure, we've avoided over 2,655,378 pounds of carbon with this program. And the reason why basic, I want to point out, like if you notice the basic column is all zeros, that is because basic is just what the utility normally offers in its content. So in terms of renewable energy, so there's nothing to sort of gain when you sign up using the basic option. But if you're on 100% green, which is, self-explanatory right there, but the standard green has additional green content. That's the program that people are automatically opted into, is the standard green. So what the CCA allowed us to do was to negotiate a price that included more green content, more renewable content in our electricity supply. So this is the result of that. So these were exciting numbers for me to see too. So thank you for asking. I was going to be patient and wait till we got the report later on. So those are my updates.
That's great. And I don't know how many of the other people in the committee, but we are a family that shifted, and you had assured me it would be seamless, and it was. And the reason I was concerned is we've got solar and we get a smart reimbursement each month. And I didn't know for sure that they would have that, but yes, it's been exactly the way it was before. Yeah. So other than a new provider.
Right, exactly.
So thank you. The only, the one question I had, Stephanie, that wasn't on the list is I saw how many committee meetings you go to in addition to other committee meetings. Any comment on whether those are productive in terms of you're either interacting with colleagues at some of the other meetings and gaining insight, or can we the time commitment on those? So it's 73 committee meetings, 73 trainings and other. So just because you are only one person, so just a question on that.
It is a lot. I will say I do feel like I spend a lot of time in meetings, but I also do find it important because it's where collaboration comes in. And I think the idea was that sustainability is really a lens that the town should be focusing on in all of what we do. So I do think it's important. Maybe some meetings are maybe more productive than others. It depends on the initiative. But I will say that, I also do a lot of meetings regionally as well. One thing I'm noticing is that, and especially now, communities, sustainability professionals in communities across the Commonwealth, we are all working together more and more to share information and to share best practices so that we're not kind of in a vacuum, because some of these things are, sort of new technologies or new approaches. And so we're all working together to try to make it an easier transition for everybody. So I would say my feeling is I learn a lot no matter what meeting I go to. So I think they're useful in that way.
Thank you. We're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
So we've got a series of departments. So Bob, Tom, should we do it just in the order that you put the questions in?
Yeah, that's easiest. Whatever is easiest for people. I mean, we have public health, senior center, and recreation left, I think.
So Melissa, again, if we can put the questions up on the screen, and then we'll go through, and you all should feel free to add something if we didn't ask. We are reading the budget books as well as what you wrote for us. Andy.
Yeah, is there any reason that we have to ask all of our planning and inspections and
No, they can, anyone who feels that they've spent it, like Stephanie, absolutely leave. Rob, if you don't need to be part of the next conversations, we thank you for joining us, and you can stay or leave as you please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. So Bob, did you say public health is next?
Yep. Yeah, that's what I have next.
Thank you.
That's me. Good morning, everyone. Hi, nice to see you all. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to present on our budget and answer these questions. I'm extremely grateful for the council and this committee's interest in and support of public health, especially in this day and age when I'm constantly saying to people that local public health is so important in light of the uncertainty at the federal level, really encouraging people to invest in and turn to local public health for accurate sources of information and for services. So again, thank you for your support. So the first question that I was given, which isn't yet displayed, but do you want me to just go, Melissa, were you going to put
You can just go through it.
or should I just go ahead?
Yeah.
You've got your copies. Okay. So questions about trends in vaccination. So I did put this in the notes, but I just want to reiterate that because the COVID-19 vaccine was commercialized in 2023, that really changed the profile of what local public health departments are doing vis-a-vis vaccine clinics. So we used to run these mass clinics. We got lots of vaccine from the state. Those days are over. So we instead are sending most people with insurance to their primary care provider or to a pharmacy to get a vaccine. However, we do some clinics here. We always advertise them and talk to people about them in the fall. COVID and flu clinics, those are done in collaboration with the city of Northampton through a grant that's called the Public Health Excellence Grant, which has been in place for a couple of years now. It's a regional capacity building grant, so they get vaccine. They're able to purchase it through this grant and then provide clinics in other municipalities in Hampshire County that are part of this collaborative, this Public Health Excellence Collaborative. I will tell people that I'm hearing from the city of Northampton that the certainty of their ability to get vaccine next year is also questioned. So I just want to give a heads up to everyone, because I'm a public health professional, that there are questions about how much vaccine availability we're going to have in the future because of changes in the federal administration. So just think about that. But to answer the question that was posed, what about other vaccinations increasing over time? During the pandemic, and this all predates me, I was not here during the pandemic, but of course I experienced the pandemic in public health in other parts of the country. During the pandemic, that was the only focus for vaccination, and we weren't really doing much in terms of other diseases. Flu vaccines really fell off during the pandemic, and now that the pandemic has receded and is over officially, not that we're still not living with COVID-19, it's still out there, but not at pandemic levels. We've been able to return to some of our programs. So we do get vaccine for uninsured and underinsured folks. We're still able to get that from the state for COVID and flu. So we do some of those individual vaccines, and we can give flu vaccine again in bigger numbers. So that's why you see those numbers larger than in the past. And the other thing that we're doing is the Vaccines for Children program, which is a state-sponsored program we did not do during COVID. A lot of these basic preventive things just fell by the wayside when we were focusing on COVID. So that program was resuscitated when I came back, when I started to work here a little more than a year and a half ago. And so we are doing more vaccinations for childhood diseases, which of course is timely given what's happening with measles in the country. So that is something that we are continuing to promote. We've seen a lot of recent arrival families, immigrant families from Haiti and other countries who've been coming to Amherst, who've been part of this whole resettlement programs that are receiving services through various awesome agencies in Amherst, and many of them are coming to our public health nurse to get vaccines for their children so they can enroll in school. So that's the rather long-winded answer to why those numbers are increasing. Any questions about that?
No, thank you.
Sure.
Well, yes. The only question I have is whether it obviously if vaccines, childhood vaccines are not available, these programs will come to an end. And what would the impact be for, the public schools and all? In other words, if we can't, if if uninsured people can't afford to get their kids vaccinated, how is that going to work?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. And so I don't want to incite panic. I think it's important to acknowledge that what's happening at the federal level is a threat to public health, but I also think that in Massachusetts in particular, we have a lot of resources. And I asked the question of the public health commissioner, Dr. Robbie Goldstein, about what would happen if federal support for vaccine fell out, because the Vaccines for Children program, for example, is partially supported by federal funds. And he really reassured me and others in the audience at this conference that I was at that Massachusetts, first of all, is a state that is very vaccination friendly. Most people in the state do want to be vaccinated. There's a culture of vaccination in our state, that there's a lot of support, both sort of psychologically and also fiscally at the state level. There are trusts, money that has been set aside for both pediatric vaccine and other kinds of vaccine. So, and the third thing that he told us is that there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies in Massachusetts, that many of which do produce vaccine. And so there are many opportunities for public-private partnerships. So Massachusetts is well poised to weather some kind of insane vaccine deficit that might happen. And I feel like, nobody can predict the future, but compared to other places in the country, we have a good infrastructure, and it's unlikely that we won't be able to provide vaccine to families who can't get their kids vaccinated through insurance. So that's my hope.
Bernie.
Yeah, a comment and a question, and I think this sort of ties back to the discussion we had earlier about the hazard mitigation. When disaster strikes, you're pretty much on your own for the first 72 hours at least. So it's important to have community ability to respond to the disaster before the Commonwealth can kick in. And now even later for the feds, if the feds are still around, to kick in. So, preventative measures and that kind of planning that we've seen from our staff is critical. The question I had for Kiko is have you had any interaction with CRES around dealing with vulnerable seniors or vulnerable individuals, hoarding issues, anything like that?
Yes. So public health and CRES work really closely together. There at the Bangs, there are a lot of folks who come in, many of whom are seniors who are not securely housed, who might have mental health issues. They come in and they often make the rounds. They'll stop at public health, they'll stop at CRES, they'll stop at the senior center. And as you all know, I'm now covering both the senior center and the public health department. So I've really taken it upon myself to make sure that we are all in communication in this building about vulnerable seniors who may show up here. And if CRES is seeing seniors outside of this building, they're really good about communicating with me and with the senior center staff about what they might be seeing. So I'll just give an example. There was a woman who lives at Clark, Ann Whalen, who came over. She has some cognitive issues. She has some language barriers, and she was going to each one of us to ask for help. So I managed to tell everybody, okay, we know what's going on with this woman. Her case is actually being handled by the Housing Authority social worker at Ann Whalen. So let's make sure to refer her back to that person and connect, give the resources that we can, but make sure that we're not duplicating services. Because if we don't communicate amongst ourselves, then we might not be coordinating care for this person. So the answer to your question is yes, absolutely. We do a lot of collaboration almost on a daily basis around these kinds of issues, and that I've really made an effort to ensure that communication is happening among all the departments in this building so that we're not duplicating and we're providing the best support that we can to folks in the community.
Super. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so you want to know, and thank you for asking this question about investigation of communicable disease. So this can be your little epidemiology 101 for the day. So what happens when there is a case of a communicable disease? There are certain diseases that by Massachusetts general law are deemed reportable. Common cold, not reportable. You go in with that, your doctor's not going to call and report that you have a cold. But if you have, and COVID is also not reportable really any longer in the way that it was before. But other diseases such as measles, salmonella, chlamydia, these are all diseases that are communicable, that are reportable. So if somebody presents at a physician's office or a nurse practitioner's office, including the Musante clinic. So Musante is in our building. We don't have a special relationship with them in any way other than we collaborate with them, but it's not like if they have an infectious disease case, it comes to us. Any infectious disease case in the town of Amherst gets entered reported by that provider, and it gets entered in an electronic system that's called MAVEN, which is the Massachusetts Virtual Epidemiologic Network. So it gets reported into that. Olivia, who's our public health nurse, something pops up in her computer. She gets an announcement that there's a case of a communicable disease in Amherst, and then she communicates with both the provider and the person about educates them about the disease, makes sure that they're getting the right treatment, answers any questions. It's a case coordination kind of role. She doesn't provide that medication. It's the local provider who does that, but she would speak with the provider and speak with the patient because that person lives in Amherst and ensure that they're getting the care that they need. They know how to isolate, et cetera, to ensure that whatever they have doesn't get spread to other people. Sometimes she'll do a home visit, but mostly it's done over the phone. So that's what happens with investigation of communicable diseases. If it's a foodborne illness, and it can be tracked to a restaurant, that's when we loop in inspections. And somebody from inspections, usually Sasha Clapp, who is the main health inspector, would do a restaurant inspection and try to figure out if there is, in fact, contaminated food that could be the source of the foodborne illness. We don't deem it to be a foodborne outbreak unless there are 2 linked cases. So oftentimes it's just one. Somebody reports getting sick. We go to the restaurant. We see some things, but nothing really significant, and that's not considered a foodborne outbreak. If there were more than 2 cases, or 2 cases that are linked, then we would consider an outbreak, and there are other things that happen when that is deemed to be what's happening. So that's the process. And then the other questions that you all had about whether, about rates and whether they represent a threat to public health. So we get reports of infectious disease. I think they're at expectable levels at this point. We're following sort of the usual number of TB cases. It's unusual for us to have an active case. We have a lot of latent cases. Sometimes people have latent TB, so they're not actually able to spread it to others. But if it doesn't get treated, it could get to the active stage. So Olivia, our public health nurse, manages a fair amount of people with latent TB. Unusual for us to have an active case, but those are all sort of at the expectable levels. They don't constitute an outbreak, a pandemic, or anything that represents a threat to general community health at this stage. We get sometimes reports of pertussis. There is waning immunization coverage for pertussis. So we get those reports as well. We follow up on those. Again, slightly increasing, but not yet at concerning levels.
Thank you, Kiko.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm not seeing any other hands up, so this has been great. And as Mandy's hand is up. Invitation.
Okay, yeah, I just have one question. You indicated in the budget book that Sharps disposal is not just for Amherst residents, it's for Pelham and Shutesbury residents too. Do we get any type of subsidy from the municipal governments of Pelham and Shutesbury for the Sharps disposal programs that their residents participate in here?
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. I saw that question and I was going to mention it, so I'm glad you brought it up. So when we first started the Sharps program, we were charging people for it, $5 a container. And so regardless of where they lived, Amherst or Shutesbury, they paid $5 for the container. And that covered our costs for pickup. And, it's Stericycle is the business we work with that comes and picks up the full Sharp containers. However, we now have on the ground floor of the banks, a Sharps kiosk, which we purchased with our opioid settlement funds, and that is maintained by Tapestry Health at no cost to us. So we now have a free Sharps program for which we paid $1,000 for that, less than that, I can't remember, a couple $100 for that kiosk, and now it is maintained free of charge, so it's budget neutral, the free Sharps program. If people go to the transfer station, there is a charge for a container there just because they have to pay to get it recycled someplace else. Tapestry doesn't go to the transfer station. And in that case, again, it's if you go to the Amherst transfer station, you live in Shutesbury, you pay your $5 for the container there. So that way it's equitable.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, shall I put on my other hat now and move to senior center?
Sure. That's an easy transition.
Okay. Okay, so questions about the newsletter. And my caveat for all of this, my little preamble for the senior center thing is I've been in this job now for 2 months. So I'm learning about how this is all happening, and my questions and my answers may not be 100% accurate, but doing my best to figure, search through things and conference with the staff who also were fairly new. None of the staff that we have now were here before COVID. So some of these questions, I think we've done a good job answering, but just as a caveat, doing our best. Okay, so the newsletter. Currently, 64 seniors get the newsletter mailed to them, and 283 folks receive the newsletter via email when it's uploaded to the website. So then we additionally print 550 copies of the newsletter, which we leave out on the desk at the senior center, and which we bring to other places, which we give away sometimes to other agencies for them to distribute. And those routinely disappear through the course of the 2 months for which the newsletter is current. So those are the current numbers. It is a significant decrease from before. I'm happy to answer any other questions that people might have about that to the best of my ability.
I guess mine would be, I thought the transition to being able to get them through the email rather than paper should decrease your production costs between printing and mailing. Has that been the case?
It's definitely been the case because we used to print 3,700 of them, and now we print 550. So that's reduced our costs. And this really is sort of a standard of practice across senior centers in the Commonwealth, that people aren't doing lots and lots of printed newsletters and putting them in the mail, which is very labor intensive and postage is costly. So most of the senior centers that I'm familiar with are all moving to online. It's a bit of a shift for folks. I think it's dropped off in terms of how many people receive the newsletter. And I think it's something that we can look at. Can we do a better job of getting more people to sign up? Can we track how many people are looking at it on the website? That's not something that I've looked at or want to see. I'd like to know if that's something we can do. Because I think in general, what I've noticed over the last 2 months is that we could be doing a better job of getting the word out about the things that we're doing here at the senior center. So it's a thing for me to think about and pass on to the new person when they arrive.
I'm sure there's a group called Amherst Neighbors that goes home visits. They do lunches, and I don't know whether they've had a presentation on this, but that might be another avenue of getting people to shift from paper to getting it received. That group is I just know a bunch of people who work with the homebound seniors in that group. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. That came up just yesterday, actually. And I met Pat and Paul when I first started here, when I was not at all involved with the senior center, but they're a great resource. I think the senior center could be doing a much better job collaborating with Amherst Neighbors, especially when it comes to kind of cross-promoting these sorts of services. So definitely going to be following up on that.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. So health screenings and clinics. So the senior center previously had a senior services nurse position, which was funded by a private community grant that was specifically given to support that program. Again, this all predates me. So what I'm told is that nurse left at the end of 2021 and was not replaced. So during the pandemic, it was not uncommon for there to be huge shifts in personnel. It was a tough time. So I don't really know whether that grant is still available to be applied for, what happened with the funding. That history I don't have. And nobody here was here at that time either, none of the staff. So that's a bit of a question mark. However, so one thing that I've been thinking about in my role is, what other sources of funding are out there? How can we re-up some things that maybe did fall out during the pandemic? I think we're still feeling the effects of that, especially for older adults are probably more reluctant than many other populations to come back out. There are people here in the building, but fewer numbers than before the pandemic from what I've been told. So I feel like there's a lot we can do to think about how to create programs that are going to be engaging to people and to help people attend our services here. I did want to mention, let me do just one more thing quickly, is that the public health department's public health nurse, Olivia, does now offer a weekly drop-in in the afternoons on Wednesday for people to come by and get their blood pressure checked, ask questions, get referred to services, that type of thing.
So that grant came from a person at Applewood. It was literally a big donation, and I have no idea if there's a follow-up piece, but it wasn't I had to apply for it. It was delivered a check.
Interesting. When does that happen? That's great. Wow.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know which person it was. My
Okay.
mother was at Applewood when it was a big deal. Everyone at Applewood knew that this gift was being made and there was a little ceremony, but yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks so much for that history. Yeah, I think we're doing a decent job of providing health services to seniors who come into the building with the resources that we have. Olivia is wonderful and very available. But it'd be nice to be able to do more. There's also a foot care nurse who comes, that's covered through Highland Valley. She comes once a month. We have a mobile dental clinic. So we've sort of cobbled together some things. But this is something also for me to follow up on. Next question about volunteers. So absolutely, as I mentioned earlier, recovery from the COVID pandemic is certainly a factor in just decreased attendance here at the senior center. I think extra effort needs to be made to kind of reassure people and re-engage people in a lot of services. The classes are quite well attended, but in general, I think there's just sort of less foot traffic here. In terms of and that includes volunteers. People were a little less interested in volunteering during the pandemic and hasn't really rebounded. Another structural thing that happened is that the Meals on Wheels program, the senior center used to manage, and it's now been outsourced to Highland Valley Elder Services. So the volunteers that were previously sort of quote unquote senior center volunteers associated with that program are now no longer counted by us because they are associated with Highland Valley for that program. So that has resulted also in a decrease in the number of volunteers that we reported in the budget book. Other questions about that?
Nope.
Okay, then I'll go on to the last question. So explaining the increase in legal referrals. So it's a little tricky to answer this question. I think that it's possible that we're seeing more, we haven't rebounded to pre-COVID levels in terms of the number of people coming in for services, but we are seeing more people. It could be this is a particular area that folks have more questions about, and that's why we're seeing an increase in legal referrals. I think there's also been a difference in how we report this. In the past, there was a volunteer associated with our department who provided these sort of services and then referred somebody out to actual legal counsel or a legal services organization. And now we have legal services in-house twice a month. So I think with the volunteer, they didn't count the referrals that were made to legal services. And now we have a legal services person in-house who's counting those referrals. So that may also account for the increase in the number of referrals to a legal person that we're recording at this stage. I hope that made sense.
Thank you.
Okay. I did note that there was a question for community services at the end. I don't know if you are going to have time to answer that. It would be a rec, senior services, library, DEI question, but just noting that.
All right, thank you.
So I can stay on in case that question does want to be
Okay.
answered later.
Yeah, I'm just looking. At one point, there was an issue about being able to do the senior shuttle. And I think it was around drivers. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of the main driver was on leave, extended leave, a couple months. He's now back. There was a question about being able to maintain that funding, but we are able to maintain that 3 days a week. Expanding it to 5 days a week was something that was problematic. It was difficult to secure a funding source and identify a driver who only wanted to work, 6 hours a week, very, very, very part-time. So we do have it running 3 days a week now, which is great. And it's on my list of things to think about how that could be expanded in the future.
Thank you. So then now we're at recreation, and I think focusing mainly on the questions would be great, Ray. I think Ray has joined us.
I am here. Do I understand that I'm not on camera?
Your voice is here. The picture of your face, you haven't turned your video on, or you don't have a video on.
I don't have a video, and I'm fine with that. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And I didn't get a chance to see the question that Kiko mentioned, so I certainly can look at it later on if that's something that does affect us. I do want to just thank everybody for the opportunity to stand and present the budget as it affects the Department of Recreation here. we had some shifts late in our budget season that my accounting team, led by Marion Jordan, my operations manager, that we worked pretty hard to shift our budget, our FY26 budget, to accommodate perhaps the most significant change in our department since I've been here. That change was the aquatic shift that I believe is central for your thoughts here also. Aquatics finances that are not directly connected to the outdoor pools are moving right now from where they used to live in rec revolving, and now they're moving into their own revolving fund. This allows us to isolate finances and create a needed full-time aquatics director position to manage our expanded programming in the department. And so this is something we've been looking for a while, and it's the most significant shift in our budget this year, and it did involve a bunch of movement in our budget. So I can look at the questions here now. I can look at the questions that were presented, and I did have a chance. There's some really, really good questions. It's also because it's so new for us. I think that I have a pretty good understanding of how and why the mechanics of how we made the switches. This was creativity out of the finance department. This was creativity out of my department and my directors. I think I have enough understanding of it. So if there's a place where I need to ask and find out, then I certainly will. But looking at our first questions, questions that looked at our 5-year history here. The series of questions here were around our coming out of COVID and shifts in our service numbers. What I said here was that more significant than the social consequences of the pandemic. The pandemic is something that we've been very aware of, I came at the end of the pandemic, and so my frame of reference is the time coming out of the pandemic and not before. I'm not the only shift in my department. We've had significant turnover in our administration. Myself, my operations manager, our directors are new. And so I think one of the differences between when you look at our service numbers and you see what the rates of participation, the change in the rates of participation have been affected more, I think, by our counting practice, I think, is methodology. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me that were here. The 67% and 55% presented in the question are enough. The number of participants has dropped dramatically. At the same time, the number of programs has increased dramatically. And so, by itself, that's the most glaring way that I say that our counting practices are almost certainly different from the counting practices of the administration before. We didn't have the privilege of replicating their same counting methods. It has been relatively consistent. I can explain the changes in our 3 or 4 years here. I can explain the changes over that time. But I can't compare. I looked at the question, I can't compare because I don't know the method of counting before. It's not an insignificant amount. It's not an insignificant change. This was brought up in the question. It's not an insignificant change. And we have experienced some difficulty in regenerating those numbers, but not to the extent that those numbers are saying. The question about programming losses, is this a reflection of programming losses? We haven't lost major programs in the last 3 or 4 years coming out of COVID. I identified downhill skiing as one, Boatwood Project is another, and youth ed programs like Mad Science. Those are 3 examples of programs that we ran before and we haven't run since. Downhill skiing will be coming back. Boatwood Project has shifted out of our department. But downhill skiing, these programs, it wasn't directly related to COVID. We didn't lose those programs directly because of COVID, but also they didn't draw the type of numbers. Downhill skiing was certainly the larger of the group. We didn't draw the type of numbers that would be reflected in that change in the service numbers. The biggest hit for us in terms of participation has been flagging numbers in rec basketball. Our AYBL program, which at one point I do know a little bit about that before I came aboard. Our rec basketball program was at one point flushed at the higher levels, the older kids, older high school, I mean older middle school and high school. Uh, the higher divisions used to have several teams and several leagues, and we haven't been able to run it because of diminished interest at the higher levels. It has actually grown a little bit at the younger levels, but the biggest hit to our numbers and the one that my sports director Jose Allen and I have been going over is how to increase numbers at the high school level, at the sort of independent young athlete level for the rec basketball league in the high school division. But I think that the answer to the question is more about methodology than anything that's going on inside of our department. Our struggles are not. I don't think our struggles are reflected in that numerical change.
Any
Question.
any
Go ahead.
questions for the people? I'm just looking at the committee, Ray, as you've
Be happy to
responded.
answer. Be happy to respond to that if anybody has any questions.
I just have one. The morning movement activity that's been initiated is that reflected at all in the numbers you're reporting to us, or is that so new? That's all 2025. So we'll be seeing that next year.
We'll be seeing that next year.
Okay.
I don't think that's. I don't believe that that's reflected in the programming.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? It won't be reflected in our programming because it's not our registration. The schools run that registration, so we don't have those numbers inside of our registration. We can account for that. I think that's a great question. We can account for that and just pull numbers for our own reporting purposes in the future. But because the schools run the registration, it's their kids that we sort of run the program for. They don't register through us for the program.
Okay. So it's again, just reporting on that. I know you have at least one staff person usually there, so
Yes.
Thank you. That answers.
And that staff person is actually not paid for by our staff, by our department. That was a ARPA. But that's the other what I would call a major shift in the budget here this year. It's another significant change. Is the morning movement was a flagship program for us, and we are now including that in our budget going forward. Thank you. Questions about that?
No, and
Okay.
we're now at pools.
Okay, pools.
And it looks like you provided us answers. We
Okay.
didn't necessarily see all these answers before you started speaking to us. So
Okay.
rather than having you repeat what you've already answered, maybe the people in the committee can ask whatever isn't answered. Does that make sense? I'm just
Yes.
conscious of time.
Yes, thank you.
Mandy?
Yeah, a lot of questions with the pools and the aquatics program simply because we're being requested to authorize a new revolving fund. So there's questions related to that authorization that will be a separate vote, I presume, with the budget.
Yes.
I'm unclear in what you just said about recreation and all. Are the summer pool admissions where do those fees go? Are they going to go into the aquatics revolving fund or the recreation revolving fund?
Summer
Like
pools.
just the daily admissions?
Yes, the summer pools are still being governed. Anything that is expensed in the outdoor pools is still being charged to revenue goes into the general fund. The general fund the expenses go into the general fund. Those revenues go where they always have, which is into the general fund, into the recreation, into our recreation general fund. Our aquatics general fund. The new position covers all of the non-outdoor pools expenses and revenue. And so that's our expanded programming. That is our master swim program, our adaptive swim program. Our Amherst United is a huge, has been a huge addition for us. All of those the swimming programs that we've added to the middle school pool here, which we pay for out of our out of our revolving funds, and our programming that we've moved into Hampshire College and done midday work there. Those are those programs which live outside of our summer programming are happening. Uh, those are part of our revolving fund now.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, fees that relate to water use, pool use, actually don't go into the same revolving funds in revenue. Some go into this new swimming revolving fund if it relates to sort of like swim team type activities. But if it relates to summer pools or summer swim lessons, it goes into the recreation revolving fund?
I believe so. I'm just looking really quickly.
Melissa has her hand up, and so does Holly, Mandy.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to let Holly chime in on this, but I know that Ray, and is it Denise, who manages most of the programming for the swimming. So not, I'm going to go swimming on Tuesday afternoon and there's a lifeguard there and there's a pool that we maintain, but like I'm going to take a swim lesson or there's adaptive swim. And so not so much swim team, because Denise also has a job working as the coach of the swim team. This is about, adult swim, youth swim, swimming lessons, and swimming programming, and that those fees were, we felt we could identify and could support, and have been supporting Denise's salary, but we wanted to expand that, and the type that is, we have always done that with her position, but that the type of revolving account that we had did not allow for a full-time position, and the programming had grown so much that we felt it could, and she felt it could, and it seemed to be an activity that was desired and supported in the community. And I believe that the new revolving fund is new only in the sense that we needed to change the type of revolving fund it was to allow the growth of the program. Do I have that correct, Holly?
Yeah, so I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. So the outdoor pools, War Memorial Pool and Mill River Pool, have always been part of the general fund. So summertime, the pools open up, they are part of the town supported general fund. The indoor pools have always been part of the rec revolving funds. So the indoor pools, swimming lessons, birthday parties at the pools, rentals of the pools, for swimming parties, things like that have always been part of the revolving fund. They were always just part of the big general revolving fund. We had 3 revolving funds, one for adult education, one for rec revolving, and one for after school. After school is a different type of revolving fund, solely committed to the after school activities that does allow for full-time salaries. The other 2 revolving funds that we had do not allow for full-time salaries and full-time benefited employees. The adult education fund had literally one program that has been running in the last couple of years. So it didn't make sense to continue a fund for one program. So that one program is going to be combined into the regular rec revolving fund. And what used to be adult education is going to now become, or we hope to become, our aquatics programming revolving fund. Because the aquatics programs are growing so much, we have a really strong person in charge of those. We wanted to track them better. We wanted to make sure that we're able to support the full-time position and the additional programming and possibly expand programming if these programs run and make good money, then there's the opportunity to maybe do some improvements to those pools, do some additional program, purchase additional equipment or other things that we may need. So we had to pull those out separately so that we could track what is happening with the indoor pools in a better fashion. There may come a time where we combine the outdoor pools into the indoor pools, but right now it's more or less operating the same way that it was before. Outdoor pools are general fund, indoor pools are rec revolving. It is just a different type, a different law that applies to this this pool fund so that we can support a full-time position in order to grow these programs. And I hope that helps explain it a little better.
Thank you, Holly.
Yes, it did. So I just want to clear up then another, I guess, then misconception I had about this budget, which might also go to the recreation side of the budget. There's a community services municipal pools budget that starts on like 190 something.
Yep.
That was in the questions that you
That
submitted.
is, so given what Holly just said, that is separate from the revolving fund budget. So the fees that go into the revolving fund don't help pay for this municipal pools budget line that's community services municipal pools. The revolving fund is its own self-supporting revenue generator, kind of like the enterprise fund. Then is that how we should sort of think of the revolving fund? Is more like an enterprise fund-ish? I know they're not the same, but in terms of the fees that come in are fully supporting the programming and positions and pool rentals and all that the costs of those programs, whereas the municipal pools part that brings in those day passes and stuff is part of the general fund and doesn't, they don't kind of co-mix.
No, they have not in the past, and it is
Okay.
it is still the same, just a different law,
And
basically.
so is that the same then, pardon the cuckoo clock if you could hear it in the background, is that the same with the recreation? There's, you know, community services recreation part of the budget in the budget book that's, you know, in the 190s, and then there's a recreation revolving fund. Are they also sort of completely separate, sort of where they get revenues and where their expenses go? They don't mix in the same way either?
Could I move down, Melissa, to Maddie's question? It'll be in the red.
Yeah.
I think it did come up in here.
Yeah.
There it is. The total budget for recreation program, number 3.
Yes. So all 3 operating budgets in the general fund section and all 3 revolving funds are part of recreation, but they are in completely pools, Cherry Hill, and recreation is part of the general fund. And then the other 3 revolving funds, what used to be adult ed, rec revolving, and after school, are 3 completely separate, distinct funds that are more self-supporting than what the general fund side is. Correct.
So I guess that question then goes to the recreation budget on page 196 is 560. The revolving fund has 520,000 of expenses, but those expenses are not duplicated in the recreation budget of 560.
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, that's what I was trying to clear up in my head. Okay.
I see the question. I see what you're looking for in the question.
Yeah.
I was really careful because the question, I didn't want to wade into semantics on it because like all of these programs, all 6 of those budgets, the 3 operating budgets, 3 revolving funds, are essential parts of our recreation planning.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just trying to figure out the money situation of how I should be looking at costs.
Got it.
So thank you for
added
clearing
together.
all of that up.
Can we move backwards into this one to Manny's question? While we're on that, I think it was number 1 or number 2 in the red. Number 2. No, not number 2. Maybe number 4.
Forest was the pools, so I've got that.
Yeah.
Okay, you got that. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, so, and we now have, Melissa, all these answers are going to be in our packet, correct? Yes, I think so.
I put Ray's in the packet this morning.
Okay, you know, because I'm just thinking for the people writing this up, and I did see
Yeah,
the
I
answer.
didn't,
I
I
won't,
didn't
I won't
see it.
re-ask pickleball, but I didn't see it this morning in the packet, but
So
maybe.
the pickleball question is,
No, but I just was
yeah,
wondering, I'm just really asking, are all of the blue answers and the red answers, are they all gonna be in our packet?
Yep, I'm actually displaying from the packet.
Okay,
Yeah, I was able to download them, Kathy, when I saw Melissa displaying them.
okay.
And for Bernie, the questions from Tuesday are in the 520 packet.
So I'm just conscious of time. It's 11:02 and we were targeting a stopping at 11. So are there any other, while people are with us from the departments, are there any other key questions or issues to ask? Or do we have enough? And by the way, you know, the Zoom recordings, Melissa can send you a copy of this right away after we close down in case capturing exactly what was said isn't in your notes.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
And we were doing that with JCPC and it was very useful. Mandy.
Yeah, again, I'm just trying to figure out when I'm looking at, I'm going to go back to this. How do I look at service levels now? Recreation puts service levels out on page 197. Youth programs run, adult programs run, total registrants, all of that. And I know we talked about where those numbers are, but on page 266, I think it's 266, the Recreation Revolving Fund also has service levels. Are they in addition to the ones on 196, or are they a subset of 196's service levels?
I'm pulling up my budget book right now. What,
So like 266, the revolving fund says there's adult programs with sports leagues of 478 and open gyms of 840, for example, and youth sports leagues of 611. And on page 196 or 197, it has adult programs run of 23 and youth
okay,
programs run of 233. So are they completely different?
without having them
funding?
here and not wanting to delay here with us going over the time right now, but I believe that you're looking at service numbers for the rec general fund programs and our revolving funds, which are separate. We are looking at separate service numbers there. It's not an overlap. Those programs that are uh, uh, page 196. Those service numbers on page 196, I believe, are for special events and for our other. I don't believe that those are the revolving fund service numbers.
Is there a way we can get a list of which, say, programs are under the community services recreation and which programs are under the recreation revolving fund so that we know
So
when we're looking at these service levels at some point that we know which ones we're looking at where?
I'm going to suggest that we have this as a follow-up question
Yeah.
and just get something back to us because
Right.
jumping,
I will,
knowing which was accounted on which table. So the interest here is somewhat more detail and to the extent they're overlapping, show them separately. So not to put you on the spot on what went into the budget book, but what comes across, at least to me, is intense activity of the recreation programs. And when you take into everything you're doing and the dedicated staff to it, which is commendable. Well, I think
thank
it's
you.
great.
Thank you. I've noted the question. I will look at the overlaps in the service numbers and have a response back to you.
That's great.
Thank you.
So so I think Kiko, Dave, Ray, if you would like to leave our meeting, you can, or you can, and thank you very much for both your being with us, but also the written responses. They're very helpful as we try to do justice to the amount of work you all are doing on behalf of all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
I just have a couple housekeeping things for us as a committee. Next Tuesday, to the extent possible, people should get me at least a draft write-up of their section of the report. And if I know today is Thursday, and so the end of the week, people are going to be stressed to do that. But if you can't get a draft, at least come with anything you'd want to be in a recommendation, anything that departs from general, like a recommendation regarding what we saw. So on Tuesday, we'll talk about any recommendations or kind of summary things that we want to do. And when you look at, everyone now has a copy of last year's. We also at some point have to take a vote on the financial orders. And I will, to the extent I can get a beginning rough draft to people, I will by next Tuesday. But we don't have a meeting scheduled on Thursday next week. We do have a regular finance committee on June 3rd, a Tuesday, and that would be the day we have to have the final report to review and get to the council, because our 30-day time from the time it was referred is June 5th. So in terms of our timeline, so the question is, would you want to, and would you be willing to add a meeting on Thursday next week or not? If we start the discussion on what we want to report, and if everyone gets sections, I'm pretty sure I can get a full draft done with all the pieces by next Thursday. I won't be able to do it by Tuesday because to date, Mandy sent me a draft of her section, and we already did regional, and I'm halfway through mine. And mine is capital and the general government. And I did do a draft executive summary, but I worked off of last year's and then changed it. So the question is, would we want to have a meeting next Thursday? We already have next Tuesday scheduled and the Tuesday of the following week. Mandy.
I hate to suggest that we should, but I wonder if we should put it on the calendar, because if we decide on Tuesday of next week that we need it,
right. Well, that was what
notice.
I can put it on the calendar, and I believe Thursday morning at 9 works because we're not conflicting with TSO. Is that correct? The TSO folks, yeah. So I can go ahead and put it on the calendar and say, and the topic will be report review, report review. So it'll be a simple thing. And then that's going to be the same agenda item for June 3rd. Where June 3rd will be final report and vote.
I would wonder if you want to put both on the same agendas, including the votes on the 29th and the 3rd.
I will do that, Mandy. I misspoke. I'll do that for both. So it'll be report and vote, review and vote and report, so that yes. And does that work for everyone? We have to have most of us saying yes to a Thursday meeting then. And my proposal would be 9 in the morning, since we have established that as a reasonable time. And
yeah, I already put it on the calendar to answer the question for me on that. And as far as the public safety, I have an outline of what I want to say in the report, and I will try and everything to meet your Tuesday deadline.
That's great. And then what I said for Tuesday is anything aside from just the general write-up, anything we want to flag, which would be flagged in the section, but also flagged in the executive summary as some, last year, the example from last year is regional school was an exception. So we wrote a long piece on a recommendation that wasn't part of the regular budget. So I'm not hearing any objections. So we're going to post, I will get Athena / Melissa to post a meeting on May 29th, and the agenda on May 29th and the agenda on June 3rd will report, review, and vote, report, review, and vote. And then, so those are the pieces. Yeah.
And just to let everyone know, I think that there are two major issues that came up in public safety. One is the effect of the frozen positions, and the other is CRESS. And it is CRESS that is going to, I think, generate the most need for discussion. I don't want to have that now, but I'm trying to frame it with the report. So I think we're thinking along the same lines.
Okay. So I'm not seeing anyone go no with their head. So I'm taking it as a yes with their head. So we are going to post a meeting for May 27th that will say report recommendations review, initial discussion, report review and possible vote on May 29th, and report review and final vote on June 3rd to get us over the finish line. So with that, it's 11:12, so we're doing fairly well. And I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Bob,
Aye.
Kathy's a yes, Mandy,
Aye.
Tom,
Concur.
Andy,
Aye.
and Bernie.
Concur.
We are adjourned at 11:13. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.